says that we've been going for 13 seconds. Okay.
Okay, here we are.
Here we are. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 32 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. My name is Lori Beth, and this is a show that I created to interview different coaches and healers and thought leaders, all on the realm of transformation. And this is more of an inner transformation, a transformation that's about having more intimacy with life, more intimacy with self. Really burning that fire from the inside out, and as opposed to getting what you want in life. Sometimes that's a natural byproduct of the transformation that we do. And so I'm, excuse me, I'm a little sick today. So just to be real and human. And I'm also in Bali, and I'm in this like white room because it's the only place that we can actually stream from here, even though I'm in this like epically beautiful place. So it's quite ironic. And I'm really happy to be interviewing Sophie Grégoire today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lori. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. And we're going to be talking about an amazing topic, the feminine path of liberation. And we're going to be looking at this through Sophie's lived experience and her teachings. So let me just take a moment to introduce Sophie to those of you who do not know her. I'm just going to read her bio because it's so perfect. I've been doing this lately because people's bios just get to the heart of who they are. So I want everybody to hear it as it's written. So Sophie Grégoire is a writer, author, channel, reader, and transformation coach. She helps others align with their soul, self, and coaches women on the priestess path. Sophie believes that self-love as a new paradigm, an inner revolutionary tool, has the power to transform all the areas of your life. Her journey into self-love and accepting herself as she is in the areas of purpose and work, love and relationships, as well as prosperity and sexuality, has taught her tools of deep acceptance and personal empowerment that she loves to share with others. Beautiful. And so, a lot of this conversation that we had previous to the call that centered on, what the feminine path of liberation is about, as you said in your bio, is about deeper self-love and more acceptance and really listening to all parts of yourself. And then, beginning, and you'll speak more about this, but that's where we come from. And then, all outer action comes from that place of deep listening and that kind of inner inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes, exactly. This is, I think, our way, like the way that we found the other day of things that a lot is coming from within, and then it transpires, or it has many ripple effects on the external and without. But by embracing ourselves more and more and really embracing the different parts, we tend to change things rather than so we talked about this too, I remember, rather than the judgmental perspective of being like, okay, so this part of me is the shadow, and this part of me is too like immature, and this part is this, and this part is that, and this part has too many desires, or this part is imbalanced, or whatever. Instead of having this judgments, really doing exactly the opposite, listening, like, so what's going on? What do you need? What doesn't feel good? What is the block, or what is the lack? Really listening, really having this inner conversation and this inner discovery, actually, because I believe it's so easy to not really know who we are, and we never really know who we are, I believe. And by really asking those questions and being with the self as life goes also, because we tend to discover new things all the time, right? So by really creating this deep intimacy with the self, I believe that we feel so empowered to make the right, if there is anything right or wrong, you know what I mean, right decisions or move, because they come from a real empowered place of self-knowing, rather than, exactly as you were saying, while you were doing your introduction, rather than saying, okay, so I want to get there, that's my goal, I want to become, I don't know, a multimillionaire, I want to become this, I want to become that, like having those, I would say, external dreams, by really listening to the self and being like, okay, no, for me, the truth is I like this or I like that, or this is what matters to me, at least right now. And then so the decisions are really grounded in the person, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious. I love that explanation, and I'm curious if you want to talk more about what that listening process is, you know,
Yeah.
how, and even like how to, yeah, just not necessarily like a step by step, but, you know, in your experience and in your experience of supporting your clients, how do you help people to more deeply listen inside and allow all of their feelings? It's so counter to the culture that we're in, you know.
Oh, I know. Yes, it is very. Um, so what I feel, and I've been sharing with others or with myself or whatever, is to, um, when there is like not a negative feeling, or because negative is so tricky, you know, but this type of sensation, being in presence and using those moments of, for example, I don't know, anxiety, fear, or um, discomfort, to open this conversation, and let this tender part of the person come forth. So like using those moments instead of, and it's not about, like the thing could be to go directly in the mind and thinking like 3 hours about, okay, so I was anxious because this, and this is not exactly what I mean. It's more, okay, what's going on now, what is the feeling, okay, so this is what's happening. So it's this type of all-encompassing presence when something arises. So that's, I would say, a practice. I don't know if that's exactly a practice, but that's something that we can do. One more, maybe a real practice that I have, is to journal. Um, and I do it less now, but I used to do it like a lot a few years ago, like every morning. Or I would take the notebook and be like, okay, so I feel this, I'm not sure about that, for example, I don't exactly know how I feel about this thing, or I don't exactly know what's ahead about that. And as I was writing, everything was coming up, and I would find a conclusion, like, so we'll see, maybe what are the signs, or we'll see, you know, how we'll feel in 1 week. Like I was writing my feelings and thoughts, and as I was doing that, it was finding some serenity, some calmness, and it would finish by something like, okay, so, you know, something very calm. Conversely, like the beginning of the writing would be a little intense, or even watery or fiery or whatever, like full of, you know, when you're like, okay, this, I don't know. And then, okay, so that's what's going on. And most often it was, so you don't know yet, for example, about this or that. So that was really calming. So that is a journaling thing, which I still do. For example, I don't know, going somewhere and going to a coffee shop or something and writing, to it helps me connect to myself, and it helps me um, not bypassing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then the other thing is also to not stay in that, like, okay, I felt that, so what does that mean, you know, all this very, I would say, complex or very thinking type of energy that we can have also, but more, okay, I'm present with myself, I had this conversation with myself, it's open, but then I won't, like, my day won't be, if I had like a negative feeling or sensation, it doesn't mean that it's going to last. And also when we do that frequently, we can see that we can have a very negative emotion at some point about something, and then 2 days after it's transformed into something else, and it was like a layer or trauma release or whatever. So this also helped me see how, it's nothing is really final in some way. And yes, I think those are yes, I think that's the most important maybe
Yeah, I
practice.
think with the journaling thing, what kept coming up for me when you were talking is it's almost like an unwinding. Like
Mm.
you're kind of allowing yourself to fully feel through the writing instead of analyze, which is what you're
Yeah.
saying. Not like, what does this mean? It's like, oh, I'm angry about this. And it's kind of allowing the fullness of the energy to come out through your pen. And then it sounds like it would settle for you. Um,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
it's about making
Yeah.
decisions. It's not about like getting anywhere with it. It's actually about just the process of feeling and allowing those feelings. And similar to
Yes.
the first process that you named, right? Like being with
Yeah.
oneself in feelings, not in the mind.
Yes.
Allowing yourself to
Mhm.
not know, allowing yourself to kind of settle into the body and the feelings in the body.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Um, yes, and I found those practices may be more for me more important than, like, I don't know, like Reiki, yoga, like all those things that are very like important too, and taught me a lot as well. But somewhere for me, but it's also because I have a lot of Scorpio in my chart. Somewhere for me, the I would say the real thing often is to go deep in within myself, and really be able to listen to something that's maybe hard to listen or hard to I don't know, grasp about myself or about someone else. That's more like I've seen that the real work very often was in this. Okay, let's be in realness or in honesty, with yourself and with others. I feel those moments of like sanctuary. Okay, I'm with myself. Let's see what comes. Are full of, yes, I would say honesty and authenticity. Okay, what's really going on? What is really the message, or what is really the thing? And another practice that I have, which is not very organized, I would say, but it's like having some rituals, like some sanctuary, for example, having an altar in one's place, in one's home, with whatever, for example, for myself, I love cards or tarot, or I love like crystals, whatever. And being there, for example, every morning, pulling a card and saying, what's the main message for today, for instance. And there are two parts of that, right? Like when we pull it, we think, oh, that's going to give an answer, maybe. But also, if what we see is not in alignment with what we actually feel, it also gives like a friction,
Mm.
which also is a message in some way. You know what I mean? So I found this a little like fun as a practice, and also actually enlightening too.
Mm. Mm. So you're saying with the tarot, it's like listening to the message or seeing
Yeah.
just, I mean, what I'm also hearing is that and you haven't used this word, but we're talking about being in the receptive mode, so it's about
Yes.
being like, even with the
Yes.
card example is a good one. It's like, not like, what does this mean? And what should this kind of, even my body moves forward when I say that. It's very kind of, outward directed versus like, okay, like moving slow, feeling spacious, allowing the messages that want to come through, allowing the feelings in a spacious way to be felt.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes, that's very, very important. We When we are in the to-do mode, like constantly, so sometimes I would say it's a good thing because there is really an energy pushing yourself to do or to act, and sometimes it's also because there is a discomfort and there is a void feeling, and so we grasp on things to fill in the void. That's a different thing. And exactly as you were sharing, the spaciousness, if we can be in the spaciousness and allow it and let ourselves be moved by something after, like very organically, rather than inventing something or moving too fast or this type of energies, it can lead to a better, like a more grounded and centered place that's actually exactly as you were sharing, more receptive. Oh, I'm feeling a voice, there is a spaciousness, and let's see where it leads, instead of like inventing a way out or something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like a receptacle. I'm open to get clarity. So my action is very feminine, energetically. I mean, not gender, but it's like, okay, I open myself to receiving guidance, or I open myself to receiving what's best, this type of, which are very strong intentions. So it's like preparing the ground. Like I have a garden, I prepare everything, I make it beautiful, and the soil is I don't know, like ready for many flowers. And then I sort of wait and see when it's going to rain, and when there is too much sun, and and who's going to bring flowers. I don't know,
Mm-hmm. I
but there
love
is
that
this part
example.
of,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, but it's really like preparing what's really under our, not control, but under our side of the work of co-creation, right? Because we co-create, right? I don't believe we create anything fully on our own. We always co-create with the universe, with source energy, with someone else, with a group, with a tribe, with you, with, it's never like the self is like, okay, I did that, but it's always like something that energies are shared and meet, and so on, right? So if we prepare our like things in our highest way somewhere, then we can know that the highest form of external expression is also going to meet it.
Mm. Mm. That's so beautiful. I love that. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it also feels like I mean, and still the way that you're talking about that we're preparing is by that deep listening. It is by that slowness, that receptivity, that spaciousness. So it again, it's like it flowers from the ground up. We could say, from the inside out. Because right, you could be in we've we've probably all everybody who's watching is probably thinks about like co-creation, but the way you're describing it is a very particular way that co-creation happens, right? And we haven't talked about this so much, and maybe you could highlight this, or share more about this, but the kind of feminine masculine dynamic. And that, I think you're not just speaking to women here, you're speaking to everyone,
sure.
men and women. It's an inner dynamic, but part of that inner dynamic for it, for you is that it starts with the feminine. It starts with that like all of those qualities that you're like preparing the soil, and then from that this beautiful creation or expression grows. But
Yeah,
not, yeah, which makes actually more sense in nature even, right? If we think about
yeah.
it. Like if we're gonna say like we're gonna take a flower and just stick it in the earth, like
Yeah,
that would be the other example.
yeah, exactly. So to me, the balance between both energies is that the like the feminine holds the space, so within the self, and to me, the masculine would be more like the force taking action and allowing movements, and being more like the pillar that says, okay, so this thing we are going to make it in that way. We are going to, I don't know, like offer this type of work and write this, or go there and have this idea, this long-term vision, and try to nurture it in that way. That is the more, I would say, devoted part of the self that can translate the energy and the vision that the feminine wants to manifest into something that's more concrete, tangible, and also that can follow through. That can be, okay, so we one day, and then we continue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's both the tangible, like the tangible mirroring of the feminine that's creating the right energy, right? And also this capacity to be decisive and to say, okay, so we continue or we withdraw or whatever. The more, yes, action-oriented part, but they all work together. And also constantly the feminine part is also orienting the masculine, and the masculine is also witnessing things that the feminine didn't know. So it's like it's almost they receive information from different types of channels, right? And they share with one another.
And it's still, I mean, I'm still getting that for you and the way that you've, I mean, and I'm in agreement with it actually in my own experience, that, you know, that first kind of inspiration comes from the feminine, comes from the deep listening. That it doesn't necessarily come from, I think that's what you're saying. It doesn't come from like,
yes.
you know, oh, I saw this thing and now you know, I mean, we might have that, right?
Yes.
We might say, oh, I saw this thing. Like, I'm trying to think of an example, like, you know, I have this vision to do whatever, to support people in this way or to contribute in this way. But then it's like, if we go back to the model that you're you know, that you're talking about, is that then you say, oh, okay, that came. I mean, that is inspiration from the outside, but right, that came, and now I'm actually going to be with this. I'm going to let all of what naturally wants to kind of be known and be felt and be listened to come to the fore, and then that will inform what happens next.
Yes. And yes, the other thing I wanted to mention about feminine and masculine is that both really are, you know, we say as if it was two different pieces, which maybe are, but they constantly try and serve one only thing, which is like the highest good of someone, or the highest self, or the highest path, or the highest whatever. And the way they interact is more like a way of doing that, right? So someone may be a lot in the feminine, someone may be a lot in the masculine, you know, someone, like everyone has, I believe, sort of maybe not constantly fully balanced or whatever. So that's the way that we do this journey. But the journey is always about yes, like finding a new level of being, or not new, but you know, more and more empowered, and also close to our highest missions and highest good, and I don't know how to explain, because there are a lot of ideas there, but yes.
Well, it sounds like what I'm hearing there is that you just honor that everybody has a different, you know, internal relationship with the masculine and feminine.
Yes.
And that
Exactly.
if you were working with somebody, you're not going to say, oh, well, you're not in your feminine enough, you're not in your masculine enough. You're more going to you're more going to see like what is alive for them. How do they kind of relate to this process? What brings them the most joy, the most balance, and actually allows them to feel, you know, we could say like a kind of inner freedom, or, you know, an inner, yeah, whatever that dance is for them. So it's not like there's one size fits all.
Yes, exactly. Yes, totally. And it's fine to, like, personally, like, each individual has a specific relationship with that too. So there is like, yes, the full balance, and, you know, like the perfection, even that we sort of seek to attain. And then there is personality, and how we are, you know, who we are, and all these type of things. Just to come back to the spaciousness we mentioned before, it's true that, for example, in my own experience, some moments where I really could load this void and didn't feel it with like anything, were one of actually the most powerful ones. And I can remember now, for example, I remember this year, if I had decided to do that because I was feeling uncomfortable with the weight, then I would have done this and this, and this wasn't like the actually I don't think now was, when I take a step back and when I see how the journey played out, I can see that all the voids moment or all the spaciousness were actually really important and divine. There were very often when this happens, it's also preparing our energy or something is implementing, or we think it's a void, but it's not, like we're going back and forth with something, or with like the spirit is like, okay, there's no. So we think there is like nothing going on, while actually energetically, the void is active, right? That's paradoxical, but
It's funny. There's this term in Gestalt that I really like, Gestalt therapy, that's called the fertile void. And it's basically,
uh-huh.
it's a little different, but it sort of has the same concept where it's like when you've explored a polarity on, but you've explored something, both sides of something, and then it's kind of in its process of, um, shifting into something new, but you're not quite there yet, right? That's what I like about the concept. It's like there's a fertile void. So there's actually a lot of activity happening underneath the surface, right, in some way. But we're so used to, this is what it made me think about, like, we're so used to, I think we're talking about sort of the feminine more in this conversation because we're so used to operating in the opposite way, right? And
Yes.
thinking like, well, nothing's happening. Or, oh, I'm in this spaciousness, I'm in this void, I've explored all these things and I don't know. And somehow, like, we like culturally we learn like that nothing's happening then, and we don't actually learn that there's a pregnant moment that's like, or
Yes.
there's something actually quite potent and powerful that's trying to
Yes.
be birthed. Mm-hmm.
I love really like this idea of pregnancy. And same when we look back, I feel like at our journeys, or we see how each pregnancy was really important, like how also big changes or big things, doesn't always have to be like a dramatic change, but just big evolutions, they cannot really happen overnight. So again, all this spaciousness and void feeling is also a perception that we have, but it's I believe preparing the ground very often. And if we can allow it, we I would say give more attention and power to the truth, like not doing something or going somewhere or whatever just to do something, but more because at some point something is going to feel really true, like it's going to feel good. There is an indicator that I feel we can use sometimes to know if something is right, in some way in this moment, is, do I really feel comfortable with that? Like when I connect with this action or this vision or this project or whatever, do all the parts of my being feel happy? Or is it causing friction or tension, or like sort of feeling, somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
And if we can have the passions to wait for something to actually really feel right, then it's more true, like this word truth around what is true for one being, and the body knows by like finding and feeling this sensation of, yes, okay, I feel at peace with that. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's
that's
more true.
beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful, and it makes me think of another component of this conversation, which is that I think we learn to be in our minds so much and to cut off from this kind of felt sense of the body and our intuition. And so as you were speaking, I was thinking it's such a beautiful instruction, and I think that's something that is also a newly learned skill for many people, to drop out of the mind, because I think there can be a lot of conflict that people experience in making a decision because it's all in the mind, right? It's like, well, there's this or there's that, or there's this or there's that, right? And it's sort of a battle back and forth.
Yes, true,
Yeah.
very true. Very true. And I struggle with that, like more in the past, because it tends to decrease. But I would say really can be a big like thinker, So, okay, so we have A and B. So like I really used to be that way. So it's been really a lot of work for me to try and connect with the senses, like the felt sense, as you were saying. I would be, I don't know, like 5 or 10 years ago. So you have two options. So if we see the pros and the cons, really not feeling things at all, or not connecting with, like, okay, so how do I feel with that? Just thinking about it, imagining, picturing, like all what's happening around the head.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the body has such a precious wisdom. Like it doesn't like make text or something very long or something very complex. It's not like a long process to actually hear the body, but it has such a deep, it's very clear. If I really sit with this, do I feel good about it? Everywhere, on
Mm-hmm.
all levels.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's the same process, in my opinion, of what we started with, which is the learning how to deeply listen to all parts
Yes.
of the self, kind of through, through more of the emotions in the body versus through, like the story of it. So I think
Yes.
the more that you can make that space, create that spaciousness and begin to sink in. I think about it as a sinking in, like a sinking
Yes.
down, into, to me, the body is a huge piece of that. And even
Yes.
like descending into the earth and, really sort of, okay, I'm allowing all of this. I'm allowing it to move through. I'm feeling, what's here to feel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it seems, yeah, it feels like, yeah, it's a similar, they feel related. Um,
Yes.
mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yes, totally. I totally
Yeah,
agree with that. Mhm.
yeah. I was curious if you might talk a little bit about, in your writings, you use this a lot, and in this conversation you have, just sort of the higher self or your higher calling or what's in the greatest good, kind of what that means to you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and also, what's the process of
That's a
connecting?
tricky question.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so, mm, so that's really my perspective about that, right? So, but I believe we all have like a highest path or highest timeline.
Mm,
So we can, like any human being, we can do many different things. We could, like we're speaking right now, but maybe in another reality we would never have met or whatever. I don't know how to explain. Like it's like in life we have many choice points, not many, but like a few key choice points, and we can choose right or left or this or that, this timeline, this story. I want to write this story, or no, I want to write it, blah blah. And so by construction there is like somewhere exists like a highest timeline. So of course we create our realities. I'm not saying that there is something written and we have to find it, but I still believe in an element of, I would say, destiny, like for each of us, or not really destiny, like your life already is written somewhere, but more if you can evolve in time towards your highest self, then most likely your existence and your reality is more going to look like this or that. Not saying that it's
mm,
really stone, but it's like we actually have a lot of options, like at least energetically. I feel energetically we have a lot of options, and they are represented by those choice points.
mhm.
And so what I mean when I write highest good or higher calling or this is this the fact that we co-create, and we have choices, and several options exist, and a few of them, or it's not just one thing, you have to be there at a time with this person, but there is something that looks more like a being that's empowered, that has found more of their light, that has found more of their healing. It's not about becoming perfect or anything, but like we find more joy, more inner power, more peacefulness, more all those energies that are very high vibrational
Mm-hmm.
that we actually all seek, right? So for me, the highest timeline is like the reality we get to if we learn in time to embrace those high vibrational energies.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I mean by higher whatever.
I mean, let me see if I'm getting it right, but what I hear in that is that, and I really love your definition of it. Like it's not like this place to get to. It's almost like it's the place of which, if we keep deeply listening, um, there are that we will then make decisions. Like there are different forks in the road that are actually going to align us to more peace, more inner joy, more, um, more self-love, more like the qualities that you're calling higher vibration that are also just qualities that make us feel good, obviously, and that we're also then, we're also contributing to others in that way. Um, and I was also thinking that as you were speaking, that let me see if I can collect my thoughts. Um, yeah, it's also, it makes sense also from like, I don't know what the level, I almost want to say a psychological level. That's part of my training.
Yes.
But, in the sense that when we are in alignment with ourselves and what is true for us and what's like going to bring those qualities, then we make better choices in all of our lives. So we could use an example of like, somebody, maybe a woman keeps continuing to be in, whatever romantic relationships that are not really of the highest alignment for her. Like there's some kind of patterning, but that deep listening actually, and that like connection with self actually then allows for a different decision point. And of course, then when you make a different, I mean, yeah, I'm using this as an example, but when you make a different choice, right, in the external world that then supports who you truly are, and supports you being in your own what's going to be the healthiest for you, then that has ripple effects out, right, in the rest of your life. So it kind of
Yes.
works
Yes.
in different ways. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. What you just said about, like, you took the example of a romantic relationship and then you said, but this has ripple effects. And I believe that when we like change timeline or where we are ready to go, it's not higher. It's not as if like life is okay, I'm always gonna go higher. And I think this is very theoretical, and we cannot change timeline every full moon or whatever, right? But when we can embrace a next step, next layer, but a real one, like when there is a real life change, very often many things happen very like simultaneously, right? There is a change in relationship patterns, or maybe even in relationship like the person, or there is a change linked to purpose or like deepening, and then there can be a deepening also, it's those moments when many things can change with, I don't know, the community and the friendships and the this and the that. So that shows how energetic are those changes. Like the being goes to a next level, so a lot is changing around them, but it came from within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's a beautiful explanation. Yeah.
So they change, and okay, so I don't really resonate with this community anymore, or I feel like maybe, this.
Mm-hmm.
And yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. And this goes back to what we were sharing initially about the within being so, it's a central point of all of that, those energetic changes, opening new ideas, inspirations, doors. We can see, I don't know, like a movie or have a book at home like for 10 years, and actually we never want to read it, and then, or we never want to, we know we have this friend in the, like, in your Facebook friendships, and you never want to talk to them. And then one day something has changed and you feel ready to learn this or go there or whatever. So it's like a metaphor of all those options that maybe we have, but then we become ready or not or whatever to embrace something new.
And I'm curious, in your experience, like when you've been in this deep process, and then let's say there's a couple of different decisions that are presented to you.
Yeah.
Can you describe, I mean, do you have an example of one maybe, or that's something that, or just how that process works, for you? Because
Yeah.
partly I'm thinking like sometimes there can be a couple of different, nothing's like, there can be two or three different things, right? That are, none of them are going to be harmful. They're all going to be, they all have potential to
Yeah.
be positive,
True.
let's say. But yet, right, there's still something where when you deeply listen, it's like, yeah, this isn't quite in full alignment, And that's a
Yes.
mysterious process, right? It's like we don't
Yes.
always get it. But I'm
Yeah.
curious, yeah, your experience of that.
Yeah. I think I really love your question, because just before answering, I feel sometimes those decision points are like, okay, this is going to be good, this is good. It's more almost about preferences, but sometimes it's really about this is over, or this is not in alignment. So it can be like, okay, this or that, whatever, or more like a real new energy actually within the being. And so if I take examples of that, so one thing, it's a long time ago now, but when I left the corporate world, it's actually been a long back and forth with thinking of doing that. And then one day it became really clear that it had to be done. Like it was like it had to be done, for example. Or also when I left so I had several relationships, but like a long one was my fiance and so on. So when we broke up, also this was a big energetic decision. It could have lasted, I think, for a long while, but the the pattern, the energy of it wasn't in full alignment with the journey that I was feeling for myself, right? And so if we take those examples, I have others of other things maybe a little less important. For example, when I was traveling and then I decided to come back to France, like eventually, because like I was looking for something, and then I thought, okay, but now maybe you need to find things more within yourself, and maybe you could travel forever. Maybe you're searching something that's not elsewhere, So that was another sort of decision that I made. But if I go back to those big decisions, it came to me from experiencing the wrong path, or the path that's not in full alignment, and being seeing repeatedly the truth about how it made me feel. Right? Like I'm there, I'm doing that. Okay, so today I don't like it, but maybe it's just because I'm tired. And then it lasts. I think time, it's very simple what I'm saying, but I think time is a really good indicator of how things actually make us feel. And by experiencing the other option repeatedly, I ultimately really saw the truth about how my body and my energy feels in this contact, for example.
And well, what it strikes me of as well, which you're not using in these examples, is that it could be that you're going along. I mean, I think this path of deep listening, this can happen. You're going along and it actually does feel yes, yes, yes. And then all of a sudden, you take time to be with it, but then there's just a no. And I don't know if you've had this, but I've definitely had experiences where my no, it doesn't always make sense logically, but it's just what is kind of true in my heart. And then I can look back often and think, oh, that was why, now I can see how things unfolded. And now that makes a lot of sense. But that's very contrary to the way that we're taught to make decisions. So
yeah, that's very interesting. Example, someone can tell you, let's do this, let's do that, and the offer looks perfect on the paper, right? Like it could be perfect for someone else,
Mm-hmm.
or it has all the
Yeah.
example. It's like when you have like a job offer. Okay, so that's the salary and that's a job description, and like, oh, it's amazing. But then it
Mm.
doesn't feel true to me, for example. And those gut feelings are so important, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's this
Hmm.
interesting interplay between, it seems to me like between this kind of, um, there are clear, like you said, there are clear decisions that are like, okay, this is just not in my highest alignment. Like it's actually causes harm. It's not going to lead, it doesn't lead anywhere good. Um, and then there are decisions where several paths could lead to something good, but there's just an inner knowing and, a sort
Yeah.
of trusting that and letting that kind of following that, like allowing that to unfold. And it sounds like you do have a view that in your direct experience as well, that when we do follow that, even if it doesn't make sense, there's often a lot of flowering of these, I want to call them like more spiritual qualities. You could say higher vibrations. There's a
Yeah.
flowering of that. Um, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, life all of a sudden becomes easy. It's more just that
No.
it's more like the path, we could say the feminine path of liberation, or I would say like almost like it's more of a spiritual journey than it is like
Hmm.
back to this show is about, than like, oh,
Hmm.
well, now because I went this direction, I'm in the perfect relationship that I'm going to be in for the rest of my life. It's like, no, that
Hmm.
necessarily what the goal is. The goal is actually to keep growing spiritually. Um,
Yes.
mhm,
Yes, exactly. And in some ways, it's also why there is no real destination with that.
mhm,
Um, like I feel the destination is again is very personal. It's like feeling in authenticity, feeling in alignment. Maybe you're using this word, and I really love it. It's feeling in alignment with what's around.
mhm.
Um, but yes, it's not as if, okay, so I made those decisions, and then on the other side, like everything was golden, and
Yeah.
we we do this, and then we will live another part of our life, and all that. But yes, to come back to what you were saying, the gut feeling or those intuitions that sometimes don't make sense or could not even make sense to our friends, for example. We were ready to make like a big move or take like a bold decision, and we try to explain it, and people are like, oh really, I don't get it. It's also because it's not really transmissible only with intellectual explanations.
Yeah.
It's an inner knowing.
Mhm,
And you know
mhm. Yeah, and yeah, I love also what you said. I just wanted to go back to it for a moment because it's something that's so alive for me within my work and in my own process, is just this kind of what I would call spiritual materialism, that like we're doing something to get. And, I know I can get caught in that trap quite a bit, even subtly. Oh, I'm feeling this to then not, whatever, to then feel this other thing or to not have to experience this. I mean, even on that
yeah.
level. So I love that you said that also, that it's not really about this process of the higher, even what you're calling higher self or this deep listening to, and those timelines are not, it's a, I mean, for lack of a better word, it's a spiritual journey.
Hmm.
It's like, it's a journey of like the heart and the soul, we could say. Like, it's not a journey of, of getting somewhere. And that's actually not the
Yes.
point. Um,
Yes.
no. I mean, I just think it's a very important point, to be
Yeah.
making, because I think we do so often, we all can fall prey to that, right? But
Yes.
also, right, that there's something specific on the other side of that, or that there is another side, when actually the way you're describing it is, it's almost, I get this kind of vision of like a river that's just, you
Yeah.
know, going down. It's like a beautiful river that just keeps, the water just keeps, you know, sort of
Yeah.
twisting and turning. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And like it's interesting because we actually get somewhere, but it's impossible to really know.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel very often we're tempted to be like, okay, I want to get to that. Like that's my destination. And so we think, what can I do to get there? And so we have like a future goal, and so we do the present to match the future goal, which is normal, like, which is very human and all that. But it blocks a little like the possibilities, and it blocks a little the natural unfolding of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that to me feels like a good place to end. I think we covered a lot of different different topics, and some of your life journey, you know, came through. And I mean, it's if you we're right at the end, but if there's anything that you want to add, or if you know there's anything, anything that you want to share.
Yes, maybe, and it's also very feminine, you know what I'm gonna say, but like energetically, of course. But I think there is no rush, and no, even in the spiritual community, we can create a lot of pressures on ourselves to, for example, to heal and to find the right thing and the right love and the right blah blah. You know, it's like when you are better, you'll have that and all that. But I think there is no rush, and there is, you know, everything I really believe is teaching something, or is allowing something to blossom. Like, it's, I feel, you know, it's good also to not feel this stress of, okay, so there is, for example, it's interesting to say, okay, so there is this planet going in this direction, blah blah, and I love to do that, for instance. But we don't have to, like, life happens, and there is no pressure to get anywhere, even spiritually, you know, at this level of I'm fully healed, I'm fully arrived, or whatever. I think it's beautiful also to, okay, so this is where I am, and I'm at peace with what's going on and with what's around. I don't always need to be more whatever.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm totally on the same page as you, and seeing the places where I am still caught in that, and then, you know, allowing that to just drop away more and more. And I think one thing that I want to say that I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
And one thing that I wanted to say is, you know, I think that we talk, well, two things. So what you just said kind of sparked in me this, like, this is what we started with today, right? It's like this deep listening. And so it's like what you're inviting people into is that spaciousness, is that infinite patience. You know, we're just here with the now. So actually, and we didn't really talk about this, but the fabric of that, in my opinion, which is also kind of the feminine current, I would say, is that it allows for way more presence, right? And so we're actually here, we're actually in life, we're actually experiencing it, as opposed to what you were just talking about that we have a tendency to do, which is to kind of like, you know, leap forward, or to not be fully in this life that we're living, right? These bodies that we're living, like this moment. And so, yeah, I just love that. That's like, I think, I love your way of speaking about this, because it really transmits and evokes that sense of real presence with the moment. So that was one piece. And then the other piece is that I really enjoyed, I meant to say this when we were talking about it, but you know, when we were talking about that feminine receptivity and listening, you know, I think that, I don't know about you, but I think we all often hear about masculine and feminine dynamics, and it's like, oh, the feminine is like the creativity, the inspiration, but it's rare that I've heard it really like described in its depth, you know, what that actually feels like, what that actually kind of like, what that experience is like. And I think you have a really beautiful and unique way of expressing it, you know, listening to the different parts, being with them, feeling yourself, like all of that. So I just wanted to add that, because I really enjoyed that, and it gave a direct transmission of that experience.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's we hear a lot about masculine, feminine, and I think we actually all have our understanding of it, or yes,
Mhm.
intuitive understanding of it, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I just find for me that I really learn it through people's transmission of it. There's, you
Yeah.
and some other women that I'm
Hmm.
connected to. Like there's a certain, it's not even so much the words, it's the actual like, you're more and more living this thing that you're teaching, right? And so it comes
Yes,
through. Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I would
Thank you,
love,
Laurie.
yeah, I would, this is such a beautiful conversation. Um, I'd love for people to be able to know how to follow you. Sophie, uh, she writes really many and beautiful posts on Facebook, and she shares some of her channeling and other beautiful writings. And I know you have a book, and also the work that you do with clients, so that people can reach
Hmm.
out to you. Um,
Yes. So, like the best way to follow the ratings is a Facebook page, like the Facebook personal page. Then the book She's the Moon, I wrote it when I was traveling. So like it started many years ago, and then so I think those are writings from 2015 to 2018. So it's short writings and poems. It's a lot about the soul's journey, and breaking free and finding joy. And also a lot is written about the, I would say, romantic relationships or romantic feelings of like deep love or this type of writings. So you have the two facets of it.
mm,
Because romantic things have been a big part of my soul's journey, also like a real catalyst. Um, to say in just one word. So that's the book She's the Moon. And then with clients, I work on one-to-one sessions, either of course like a session or so like containers that are more repeated, like every week or bi-monthly. I have so one thing that's a 3 months container. And or also more tailored packages to create sessions in a format that's really tailored to someone wants to talk bi-monthly or I don't know, it can vary, and also the content may vary. But this is what I do, and those sessions are really like a space to be heard and received, and also to connect with your deeper self and find clarity and guidance about steps and things like that. But it also comes back to like when I have a client, it's always about for them coming back to themselves. It's not as if I'm gonna like give answers that are written in stone or that are like the liberation from whatever. It's more like a journey that we share that helps them go back to like a part of themselves and then do what they want, or take what resonates. It's like allowing a reconnection, right, or a deeper connection maybe.
yeah, and I would also say it's really everything that we talked about, that
Yes,
you
yes.
just repeated that. So it feels like the same process. And I love also that I just want to name like feels like it's also that deep listening, that feminine place to, offer different kinds of containers, like based on the person, right? Because you're really tapping into who that person is and what the need is, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I just, yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again. My name is Lori Beth, and I have a 4-month program that's called Dark Feminine Alchemy, and I do for women. Um, and the program is really about transforming darkness, trauma, and pain into pleasure through the body. I have many different practices that I teach, and your power and beauty. And it's really it's a very strong container, and I offer somatic and trauma healing work as part of that work. So we do very in-depth work in the body to unwind old traumas. And so that you can reach out to me if you're interested in learning more about that program. Okay. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bye bye.
Bye. Let's see if we